Hello and welcome. For the second monthly quiz, we're going to see what to do when facing a 3-bet. Before jumping into the solution of the quiz, I would like to address a couple of warnings when using Snowy to analyze those kind of situations. First of all, if there is one area where explosive play takes precedence over GTO, this is it. Since when we are facing 3-bets, we are playing for a lot of blinds and maybe for stacks. And 3-betting ranges are varying a lot from a player to another. So, for example, if we open pocket jacks and we are facing a 3-bet from a guy who never 3-bet, who has like a 3-bet percentage of 2 or 3%, the best strategy is just to fold. Of course, it's an exploitative strategy, and as all the exploitative play, we are getting exploitable ourselves. Now, villain should 3-bet us a lot, but we are giving up equity according to GTO, assuming that this player doesn't have enough bluff, if any, in his range. And on the opposite, if a villain is a total maniac and is 3-betting 20%, now we should 4-bet with jacks. Secondly, when we are facing 3-bets or squeezes, the situations are very volatile. Between folding our hand and losing a couple of blinds and pushing all in and playing for 100 big blinds. So the variations are huge, and therefore Snowy evaluations are very volatile. Let's see, for example, the first question of the quiz. Facing a 3-bet of 10 big blinds, Snowy advocates to 4-bet pot, and Preflop Advisor suggests to re-raise aces, kings, and ace-king, plus some aces as a bluff, to call with the hand in yellow and fold the one in white. But if the middle position re-raise for 11 big blinds instead of 10, now Snowy would advocate to re-raise for twice the pot. So the 4-betting ranges are quite the same, but the strategies are quite different. Why? Because with one more blind in the pot, according to Snowy, now there is no more room for 4-betting pot and folding, and we should 4-bet big and commit ourselves. Those warnings being made, I think we can still learn a lot from Snowy and its preflop strategy. But general principles are much more important than knowing if this particular hand belongs in the 4-betting range or in the calling range. This will vary a lot according to our opponents, the effective stack size, and a couple of percents of difference between an opponent 3-betting range or 5-betting range would matter a lot. The first thing that Snowy does much differently than the common regulars is that it will call where people would automatically 4-bet. So this is an example here. Snowy raised under the gun with pocket queens and is facing a 3-bet from the button. Here villain is on the button, so he has only to deal with the blinds behind, and he can play back with a much wider range than in the previous example where he was under the gun +1. Nevertheless, with pocket queens, Snowy would prefer a call. So it's very important here to pay attention to all the details. According to Snowy, 4-betting is still plus EV, it will gain 1.78 blinds, but a call is much more profitable, winning twice more. So is that a slow play from Snowy? Not really. We can use that tool, hand strength, to determine what would happen when 4-betting. So the first panel is evaluating the equity of pocket queens against the 3-betting range. So on the scale of 1 to 2, pocket queens is still favorite. And then on the right, Snowy evaluates what would happen if we 4-bet. So if we 4-bet for half pot, villain will probably call almost with his 3-betting range in position, and the equity of pocket queens at showdown is almost the same. But if we 4-bet pot, now pocket queens is no more favorite against villain range. Still, a 4-bet pot is plus EV, since we are winning when villain was bluffing, and we are protecting our hand, for example, if he 3-bet with ace-5 suited. But pocket queens is behind the range villain is give us action with. And that makes sense. Even if villain was 3-betting bluff a lot, he has to realize when we are 4-betting from under the gun, we really have a hand. So we should realize that pocket queens sits far ahead or far behind over villain range, and we are not pushing a lot of equity by 4-betting. And a call is then the best line. Okay, the second reason why Snowy likes to call 3-bet, it's true for pocket queens, but I'm gonna illustrate with the next example. Here, Snowy suggests to call with kings. Let's have a look with Prefab Advisor what prefab ranges are. So Snowy would 4-bet for value aces and ace-king, only 86% ace-queen offsuit, but we can round it up to 100. Then Snowy would 4-bet some hands which are too weak to call the 3-bet with, especially with blockers, and call with the range in yellow. So let's compare those range with a standard regular. Those ranges will depend on which limit we are playing for, and also on which website we are playing for. But I guess most of the regulars would 4-bet for value with queen plus and ace-king. I think the 4-betting bluffing range will mostly be the same. Everybody knows that it's good to 4-bet with blockers. And for their calling range, I think most of the players will call with their pair for set mining, and most of us would have tough time to fold ace-queen, king-queen suited, and ace-jack suited. So comparing those ranges, Snowy would have a 4-betting range for value much stronger than the other regulars. Since there are less combo in it, he will not be able to bluff as often as other regular would be able to. But I'm not sure that most of the regulars are 4-betting bluff as much as they could in that spot. And to finish, Snowy would have a wider calling range, but much stronger than the one from the other regulars. And I think that's make a much stronger strategy when facing a 3-bet. Another reason to call with big hands is for slow playing. If the effective stack is 100 big blinds, Snowy would very rarely do it for obvious reasons. First of all, if we want to be able to 4-bet bluff, we need to 4-bet for value, and aces has to be in that range. Secondly, 4-betting with aces allow us to stack opponent with a cooler when he has kings or ace-king. And lastly, we also want to protect our hand, since if we slow play and call the 3-bet, it's not to fold the post-flop. But like in this example, when the SPR is 2 or under 2, as a brief reminder, SPR means stack to pot ratio, so it's the ratio between the effective stack and the pot post-flop. For example here, if hero calls, the pot will be 41 post-flop, and the effective stack is what is left to the big blind, 80, so the SPR equals 2. Here, Preflop Advisor suggests to 4-bet only 12% with aces and to slow play 50% with kings. Still have a strong value range with ace-king, queens, jacks and tens, hands that need more protections than aces or kings. In the next situation, for a change, is now a blunder not to 4-bet. So what happened here? Hero opened from the small blind and facing a very big 3-bet, 4 times the preflop raise. The point is that we want to be able to steal the blinds very often. Preflop Advisor suggests to raise with all that range, all the hands in green. We are getting great odds on the steal and there is only one player left. But when we are facing such a massive 3-bet, we won't be able to defend a lot. So in order to protect our stealing range, we need to 4-bet with a wider range, and pocket jacks has to be in it. The second main difference between Snowy and the regulars are its sizing for the 4-bets. For years and years, all the theory, all the books, all the videos on the training sites teach us that we should 4-bet for the minimum. And here, despite we are in a late position against blind battle, despite we are in position, Snowy says we should 4-bet pot. So what's going on? Well, first of all, a pot-sized bet fits more Snowy 4-betting strategy. As we saw through the previous examples, Snowy defends principally against 3-bet by calling with a very strong range. He calls with queens, he calls with kings, and sometimes even he calls with aces. So Snowy 4-betting range, it's very polarized. When he has aces, he wants to force his opponent to get in or to protect his hands, and when he has a bluff, he wants to maximize his chance of fold equity. But the main argument for 4-betting half pot was that the 3-better was not able to 5-bet for less than all in. If he click back and we shove, he almost has 2-1 on the call, and whatever his hand is, unless we have aces, he has the odds to call. Snowy proved that wrong and showed us that there's still room for the 3-betters to 5-bet bluff for half pot and fold to a shove. Here is Preflop Advisor's range. 3-better has aces, ace-king, queens for value, slow play with kings, and as a bluff with a lot of aces that he will fold on the shove. And that changes all the 4-betting strategy. We don't want to be in that spot with jacks, for example. Snowy says we should fold now against the 4-bet, but a call or all-in is just a loss of 1/3 of the blind on a pot of 200 blinds, so it's nothing. Basically, by 4-betting with a wrong sizing, we have turned one of the best no-limit hands into a coin flip with 0 EV. So in all the standard situations, Snowy will always 4-bet pot. Let's see a couple of exceptions. In the previous hand, Villain had 3-bet very big, so now a 4-bet pot would engage too much of a stack, and we have to 4-bet for half pot. Similar reasons apply in a cold 4-bet pot. If we 4-bet pot, we have to raise to 68, so a jump from half a blind in the pot to 34 blinds. So to be able to widen a bit its 4-betting range, Snowy choose a half bet pot. It's not a situation where Snowy 4-bet bluff a lot, and even for half pot its range is pretty strong, but if we raise for pot, now we can just raise as kings plus and ace king as a semi bluff. In the last three situations, Hero is facing a squeeze. A viewer suggested me that hand and asked why is it correct in that situation to get in with ace king suited and not with ace king off. First of all, ace king suited has 3% more equity, and when we are pushing 100 big blinds, 3% is a lot. If you are familiar with Snowy evaluations, a difference of 3 big blinds between two lines is very big. But there is a second reason which might be overlooked. Pushing or not pushing ace king offsuit also impacts our overall 4-betting range. Her range is much stronger if it contains 4 combos of ace king than if it contains 16. The second question was, does Snowy calls here to induce a call from behind? The answer is no. Snowy would be very tight in those situations and avoid the maximum to be between a pre-flop riser and a caller. And the next hand will illustrate this. Same stack sizes, but now the free better is from the blinds, so pre-flop riser has the position on it, but still he will not defend a lot and fold 84% of the times, while the guy who called the pre-flop raise, now since he has position and it's heads up, he will call with 6-5 suited and with a wide range, about 78% here. The very last hand is a bit of an exception. Now Hero is on the button with the best hand possible on no limit hold'em, and the squeezer is all in, so it's okay to call. We want to trap player 2 for the rest of his stacks, but if Hero was not in position, for example on the cutoff and the first caller on the button, Snowy would not take the risk and 4-bet here to protect its hand. That was the last question of the quiz, so time for me to say goodbye and see you next time.